Okay, so we have had 24 people registered, and of course, not everybody can show up live, and so that's why I'm recording it. But good morning, good afternoon, welcome to this official first segment of COSEM's resource fair. My name is Amy, and I'll give you a bit more of a brief intro to myself in a moment, but I just do want to say how grateful I am and my organization, MindWell Education, how grateful we are to be involved in COSEM's conference, and especially this resource fair, which is such a cool idea where people can, for free, just get introductions to all sorts of resources that support mindfulness and social emotional learning in the school and in classrooms and school communities. So again, thank you to all those who are joining with the camera and who have joined by telling me where you are. We've got Kansas and Ohio, Illinois, Kentucky, Utah, Jersey. As I mentioned, I'm in Spain, but originally from Canada. Hi, Lisa. Thank you for putting on the camera. So here's the thing. I'm just going to give you a really brief intro to who I am and then show you a couple of the resources that I have that I think and hope could support you. Also, I'm really happy to take any sort of questions at any time. And it's really kind of casual. And one thing I'll continue to say throughout this little presentation is that you can contact me or my colleague Kevin at any time. Kevin can't be here, he's got a prior engagement, so it's just me today representing MindWell. But if you have any questions as I go through my short presentation, just pop them in the chat. But I will also stop here and there if you've got other questions that come up for you. But if nothing that you have if you don't have any questions today or nothing's answered, you can always contact us afterwards for sure. We're really open to that as well. So again, very grateful to COSEM to be involved in this resource fair. So what I'm going to do today is just do a little presentation in particular about these two books that we have. And actually, where do these books come from? Oh, I've got a discount code for sure that I'll share with you all at the end, but where did these books come from? And they're born out of the work that we've done. And what is that work? So I mentioned I'm Canadian from Canada, and I spent most of my career as a high school teacher and also a school counselor. And early in my career, I can remember having a really hard time. And I actually talk about this in a TEDx talk that I gave in 2013. And I was having a hard time personally and professionally because teaching was really difficult for me. And I started using mindfulness and meditation as a tool for my own stress management and mental health. And I say in the TED Talk at one point, I'm like, oh, and then I noticed like I stopped crying in the bathroom so often at work. Like there was something happening in my own life that because I was more aware of how I was and how I was doing, somehow it made teaching, for me anyways, more enjoyable. I remember feeling more connected to my students. I was like, okay, I'm starting to feel better, basically, and it's impacting my teaching in a positive way. So I was like, what is this stuff, this mindfulness thing, and how can it be useful in education? So in 2012, a couple of colleagues and myself, we did start this MindWell Education, and really we work with school communities and bringing mindfulness and social emotional learning to the whole school. And it is born out of our own experience, as I said. So that's what I sort of want to share with you today with our resources, because we've got trainings and stuff, but I'm going to start with the books. And when we work with school communities, we use these two guiding questions, like what role can mindfulness play in developing well-being in school communities? And why is taking care of ourselves an essential factor in promoting well-being in schools? So this is how we set up a lot of our trainings. And then we break it down into these three aspects of mindfulness in education: being mindful, teaching mindfully, and teaching mindfulness. And in fact, it's the first book, The Mindful Teacher, Mindful School, that came out in 2017, that really covers these first two aspects quite in depth. Sort of what is mindfulness, what is it all about? And in particular, we focus a lot on teaching mindfully. So not necessarily even teaching the young people yet. And I'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment. The second book, The Mindful Teacher's Toolkit, this one came out in 2021, actually, and it came because we had a lot of people who were asking us more specifically for practices that we can use in the classroom with young people. So that's why we created that one as well. So really our three aspects are encapsulated by these two books, and that there's so much information in them that we find and not just but we've been told they're really helpful to educators. So what I'm going to do, I'll just do a really sort of quick, I call it like a whistle-stop tour through each of the books to show you what's there and to show you other resources we have on our website that are available for you for free. And like I said, anytime, if you've got any questions or comments, please just pop it in the chat. But I'll continue for now just to show you a few pages from Mindful Teacher, Mindful School. Again, looking at mindfulness, how can it help? A lot of schools have found that this book is really useful as an introduction to their staff about what mindfulness is and how it can be used in schools. And not necessarily, again, the idea that everybody wants to go on and teach mindfulness, but how can actually looking after yourself and increasing your own positive mental health and awareness of your own mind and body, how can that actually help improve your teaching? So the book has a lot of information about that, but in particular, it's that second aspect of mindfulness and education, the teaching mindfully, that we really develop. And we've developed this because of the support that we get from social neuroscience. And the social neuroscience of education, we base a lot of our stuff from a book by Louis Cozzolino called The Social Neuroscience of Education, that really goes in depth about, what it means to teach and how a teacher is actually stepping into a role, so this adult role, and humans learn through interaction and through relationship. So if they learn through relationships, then the relationship that we have with our students, hopefully is going to be positive and strong. But we know it's not always easy to do that with all the demands of the job and dealing with 30 other personalities in your own classroom day to day. On a good day, it's hard, but what if you're not feeling well? What if you're having your own stress and your own difficulties? So we really explore that aspect of teaching mindfully. And when we talk about, like self-care and stress management, it's not just talking about like a bubble bath, although don't get me wrong, that's super helpful, but really, what does it mean to care for ourselves and why does it matter in schools? And, there's this whole, since we've been doing this work, there's this whole like huge movement on well-being, not just in education, but well-being in general, which is wonderful, but which can also sometimes misrepresent what it actually means. And, taking one or two deep breaths is not going to solve all of your problems. So how do we manage being in this world? How do we manage being an educator while also finding that balance, or recognizing that finding balance is actually quite hard? And in some days we're going to be out of balance, where a lot of the times what we're doing is working too hard. And so how do we redress that in a way that makes sense and is practical? And that's something Kevin and I were really, really focused on when we're doing our work, is making it practical, because we are teachers, we know teachers, and we know that you don't just want some other theory and some other thing to do, but what can actually be useful in schools. And we think that we've helped to create that. So we spend a lot of time on the teaching mindfully, and some schools have actually used this Mindful Teacher, Mindful School as a whole school sort of reading project, or their summer reading, and some have used it, and they've told us they've used it with quite a lot of success in terms of doing book clubs with these, with interested teachers. Because of course, not every teacher is going to be interested in mindfulness, either for themselves or for their classrooms. So sometimes just a voluntary book club is a really cool way to sort of start introducing this idea into schools. Yeah, so we talk about the optimizing the learning environments and how you can actually do things right now, even if you're not trained in mindfulness. What can you do right now that can help optimize the learning environment in your classroom? And even though it's the second book that has more of the practical exercises, we do include quite a few in the first book as well, and have a whole case study also on facilitating deeper connections, how we use listening as a skill to help students connect with themselves and each other, and for teachers to connect with students as well. And this is a connection of mindfulness and social emotional learning. So that's my like super quick intro to Mindful Teacher, Mindful School. But I'd want to let you know that there's much more information on our website, mindwell-education.com. In particular, the free copy of A Little Guide to Mindfulness, which you can download. And then actually for each of our books, we provide more resources for you. So for example, in the book, we talk about these and write out some of these guided practices, but there are recordings of the guided practice there for you, so that you can, use these for yourselves as teachers. And then we've got some great short videos, 2 to 3 minute longs, also again, introducing this idea of mindfulness education. What does it look like? Why should we bother? And some tips for the teaching mindfully. Okay, that's me and that's my voice for the first 12 minutes. Right now, are there any questions or comments that you have just about that information that I've given to you so far? Okay, Mike, yeah.
I teach almost predominantly adults. I'm not, in any way diverted by that, because most of the training I receive is teachers teaching children and adolescents, and I've just grown from that immensely. I especially reach out to people in the disability community, all disabilities, mental health, intellectual, physical, and they have very overlapping needs. My point is, I'm just verifying this is going to be beneficial for me. So far, what you've shared has been. But I'm not in the wrong person in the wrong place, am I?
No. I mean, there's got to be a reason you're here, Mike, right? No, for sure. The work that we do, even though we are, we're educators and we predominantly MindWell, we're training other adults. We train educators in mostly those first 2 steps of being mindful and teaching mindfully, for gaining skills that can help them basically interact with others. So regardless of what profession you're in, that's going to be really useful. The teaching mindfulness, that might be more specific to teaching the young people. And one thing you'll see when I look at the second book is that any of the skills you're learning, whether it's to train adults or to train young people, they can be transferable. So I think you're in the right place.
Yeah. So far, the adults that I reach out to have been very receptive with what I'm doing the Breathe for Change training. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them or not. And I'm doing the 300-hour.
Wonderful.
So the community that I reach out to on Facebook and so forth, they're very receptive to what I've shared. That's
wonderful. Yeah, Breathe for Change is wonderful. That's really cool. Thank you, Mike, for sharing that. I appreciate it. And I see that in the chat. Also Kim from Baltimore, hello. And Michelle, excited to start reading. I hope so. We found that educators find it useful. So I hope you find it useful as well. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this. We really, like I said, teachers are a tough audience. Educators are a tough audience. You've got to give them something that's actually worthwhile. So let me show you what else that we have that I think is worthwhile as well. And that is the second book. So in the second book, what we did is we sort of expanded the exploration we did in the first book. And really, we combined the mindful awareness training with social emotional learning. And for us, that's called awareness-based well-being. It's also, a lot of people refer to it as mindfulness-based social emotional learning. And you can see how in our framework, mindful awareness training, when you are just developing your own skills of understanding how your own mind and body work, those are automatically going to support these social and emotional competencies. So these 5 competencies as set out by the CASEL organization, right? The Collaborative for Academic Social and Emotional Learning in the States, which is a fabulous organization if you don't know about them yet. The mindfulness training does help support the development of those competencies. And of course, again, for us, it's for the whole school community. It's not just students, it's teachers and parents. And actually, Castle also says that as well, that these competencies aren't for K to 12, that they're from K to adult. Our students will not learn unless these kinds of skills, unless we're modeling it for them. So in the book, we are very specific. This Mindful Teachers Toolkit then is basically all practical exercises that you can use with different age groups. And all of the activities, we designate them with particular skill icon about which social emotional capacity or competency does that particular mindfulness activity enhance or grow, for example. And here's the table of contents for this book, just so you can really get a good sense of it. The first section breaks it down. There's a chapter on each of these age groups, and each chapter is filled with lesson plans, basically very detailed lesson plans, essentially in like, how do you introduce this to this particular age group? And we're very specific about it being age appropriate, because you're not going to be teaching a 4-year-old to sit in silence and follow their breath for 5 minutes, because that's not developmentally appropriate. And actually, 4-year-olds are in the present moment, really. They don't necessarily need help with like a chattering mind. They need help maybe with emotional regulation or emotional awareness. So not one exercise is good for every single age group. So we really give some details about that. Chapter 5 is the top teaching tips. And then the second section is like embedding it across the school. How can we make this a whole school initiative without alienating people or without forcing people to do it? And the chapter 8 is really about developing that coherent approach and the Q&A. And I just wanted to point to the conclusion as well. The title of the conclusion really is it says aligning awareness-based well-being with societal and environmental change. We really give a rationale, and we do this at the beginning of the first book too, a rationale for why we're doing this work in the world. What is it about? Why are we doing it? And we're connecting it with the wider world, and about how the need for, a raising of consciousness and awareness and development of our capacity to communicate and collaborate is actually fundamental to healthy students and citizens, actually. So even though there's only a chapter per age group, we have actually also suggested that you use it as like this pick and mix. So I'm a high school teacher, right? So I wrote the secondary years and middle years chapters, and my husband and other partner did the other ones. We collaborated. But in the secondary years, what I noticed is that actually I've got those lesson plans, but I can dip into the middle year section, because some of those practices and activities and lessons can actually be used with my age group if I adapt the language a tiny little bit. So you actually get more than just the 5 or 6 lesson plans. You've got more if you're dipping in and out of the other age groups as well. This is just a sample of the primary years classroom and of the first page there. So you see what kinds of activities are there. And for each one of these, there are specific scripts. We give all the rationale and the actual words to use while you're leading these particular activities. And, it's interesting with the scripts. It's great for people who are starting out and who don't know, like, I've got a classroom of 12-year-olds. How do I introduce mindfulness to them? What can I do? So we've got those lesson plans, and then the actual mindfulness practice itself that you are guiding. Some people, when they're just starting out, don't know what words to choose or what's going on. So we explain all of that and explore in particular the intention, like, why are you doing this particular practice? What's the point and purpose of it? And then provide the script so that early on you can be comfortable. But our hope is that eventually you don't need the scripts anymore. And you're working from your own experience. It's almost like just regular teaching. I know when I was and first started teaching, every single thing I was teaching was like written down. What am I going to say? What am I going to do? And now if I go into a classroom, I'm a bit more relaxed about it all. So it's the same thing with the mindfulness teaching itself. But we provide all the scripts for teachers as well. What else? And there's some teacher reflections in there as well as you continue this work. And I just want to, I've got a few minutes. Yeah, I just want to share really quickly a couple of slides. This is, as I said, each of the sections is about introducing mindfulness to that particular age group. And there's a way that we introduce it to the middle schoolers that I just want to show you a part of that, right? So we would have talked a little bit about mindfulness and what it is and why it could be helpful to the young people. But in terms of explaining mindfulness itself, this is what we say to them. And this is in the second book as well. So we say this idea that, okay, so imagine this is the earth, and we all have a body that's held to the earth by gravity, and we all have a mind. But sometimes that mind, as you know, can be really concerned with the past, maybe regretting something or caught up in something that happened earlier in the day or earlier in the week. Sometimes the mind can be off in the future, really worried about maybe an exam that's coming up or worried about a conversation you need to have. Sometimes even in the moment, we could notice that our mind can be quite chattery and quite critical, even of ourselves or of other people. So what can we do about this? Because actually, even in some ways, it can feel like the mind actually can take the body off of the earth in some ways, that we lose our sense of connection to ourselves, to our body, and to the earth, because the mind can be so powerful. And the mind is wonderful, but we know sometimes we can get lost in obsessive thinking or worried thinking. So what can we do to help with that? And what mindfulness helps us to do is it helps us to connect back in to the body so that our mind can be more here and less worried about the past or future. And we can use the body as an anchor. And so sensations in the body can be an anchor for that wandering mind. Sensations or developing awareness of our senses, like hearing and listening to sounds, can be an anchor. Sometimes our own breath can be an anchor for that worried mind that's going everywhere. So we give them this tiny little bit of theory, and then in the book it goes on to explain how we then do a really quick activity. It's like we call it hand heat. You rub your hands together, and that creates a sensation. And then we just guide them through noticing the sensations in their hands. And it's a really sort of non-threatening, quick and easy way into what mindfulness is for like 12 to 14-year-olds. And how I use that. So that's in the introduction to the middle years. But in fact, I used it also in the secondary years. So this is the first page of the secondary years where it shows the different sessions. There's 5 different sessions. And the first session, it's called Mindfulness, Why Bother? We say, we use those body-mind slides from middle school also in the introduction to the secondary years classroom with more information, because they're secondary years, they're older, right? I particularly like the session 5 in this one, where we look at contemplative career planning and setting intentions and have different mindfulness activities to support these. Because as the students are getting older, we're trying to help them to build their own self-awareness and an ability to have agency and responsible decision-making for themselves and autonomy. Included in this second book are also top teaching tips based on all the experience we have from teaching. We teach internationally. We've taught around the world for the past 11 years. What tips are helpful when you're actually teaching mindfulness? So there's a whole section on that as well. And as I said, section 2 is about embedding mindful awareness across the school, using it in language classes, using it in sports, using it in regular classrooms and how you communicate with each other. We use pairs listening as well as counsel practice. You see there's middle school students doing a listening practice. And then how do you actually use mindfulness in your social sciences classroom or your math classroom, right? How can it be embedded and built in? How can it be used in special education, counseling, and student support services? We give little activities. These are things we call like seasoning the day. So tiny little things you can do. It's not necessarily a curriculum. It's just these little moments where we can come back to ourselves and to our bodies. Of course, we talk about trauma and sensitivity to trauma. And we're very lucky that David Treliving has supported us and wrote some stuff for our book in talking about mindfulness and trauma, which is very important these days. So having that awareness. He is really the expert in mindfulness-based trauma sensitivity at the moment. And then we show how other schools have created, a whole school approach to well-being using mindfulness and social emotional learning. So I'm aware that I'm talking a lot, but I want to make sure I get in a few more things before we finish here. And just like the first book, on the second book, there are also resources on our website that are free. You can just go to them right now if you want to, of showing how to do the activities, some of the activities that we've listed in the book. And so there's videos, and then here there's an audio of the soften and support practice that we do for the high school students. There's a document here about the International Baccalaureate, looking at it through a social emotional lens. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know there's a lot there. And in the final chapter of that second book also are the top questions. How can we change if the education system doesn't change? What if there's not time or money in the budget? And lots of these common questions that we've had over the years. So just to conclude here, this idea of understanding ourselves, our minds, our bodies, and our emotions, we believe it's a key life skill. It's not just an add-on, at the end of a school day or one small thing at the end of the week, but that schools can actually become centers of human development when we're looking at what it is to be a human being alongside academic achievement. And these skills of attention and emotional regulation, self-awareness, yes, they can help with stress management, but actually it's to help us to flourish and to become these human beings who can deal with and manage the world we're in now, but also find ways to enjoy it and to connect with each other. We finish with this idea of what we want for our children, we need for ourselves, so that if we're looking to teach this to young people, we need to be developing these skills ourselves for our own mental health, but also so that we can support them in their own journeys. Our friend Chris Willard, who does a lot of this kind of work in schools, says the best way to create stressed out kids is to surround them with stressed out adults. But of course, the opposite is also true. The best way to create kind, calm, caring kids is to surround them with kind, calm, caring adults. That's the way to do it. And so we want to be able to do that for our educators. And finally, this is our signature course, which develops each of these three aspects of mindfulness education. We have another cohort starting in September, but if it doesn't suit your time zone, please just email us and we can create any kind of course for your own purposes, for your own context, for your own school, for your own community, whatever you need. We can help to do that. And just contact us at any time, and we can have a free call and look at ways that we can support where you are. So for these two resources, for our two books, the discount code is 25% off from the publisher, from Corwin. And the code is Corwin25. And you actually have to go to their website, uscorwin.com, to be able to get that. And if there's bigger bulk orders, or you wanted to order for your whole school or something, I know the publisher can hopefully help you. And if you need more help, you just contact us through our MindWell Education website. Well, like I said, Whistle Stop Tour, and it's officially ended now, but I'm happy to stay on if there are any more questions or comments. It's up to you, but I understand if you have to leave as well. So thank you again for your time. I really appreciate you showing up live. It's really fun. And for those who are on recording, again, contact me or Kevin if you need to. Enjoy the conference. Have a really good time, you guys. Take care. Thank you so much. Thanks, Michelle. Thank you.